This is Polyamory Weekly for August 30th, 2005. Coming up on this week's show, thoughts on luck in America, a listener's first frubble, polycards in the offing, a taste of poly smut, facing monogamy, jealousy as a refrigerator, and a poly mission statement. Whew. Guys, I'm tired just saying all that. Yes, all that is coming up on this week's Polyamory Weekly. Hello and welcome to Polyamory Weekly for August 30th, 2005. For our under 18 listeners, this is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, visit scarletteen.com. For everyone else, this is still Polyamory Weekly, and I am Minx, your host. This is Tales from the Front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. And if you would like to contact me about anything you hear on the show or things you don't hear on the show that you'd like to hear, email me, cunningminx, cunningminx @gmail.com, or call the listener comment line at area code 206-600-5677. And I'm talking really fast because, guys, we have such a humongous show. It seems like a lot. We'll see. And a lot of it's because I got so much listener mail this week. You guys are really overwhelming me. And unfortunately, it's getting to the point where I can't read as much as I'd like to on the show because of time constraints. And so I'm working hard to excerpt things and just pick out paragraphs here and there of the most pertinent things, because one thing that's really striking me with all the listener mail is that it's like I've always said, every single poly relationship is different. Everyone comes at it from a slightly different point of view. Everybody has sort of different things that work for them. And I love it when you guys write in and tell me, okay, here's what we do. Really helps get me perspective. So the first letter was actually not a letter. This was in response to the reading from 2 shows ago, show number 22, I believe, on being lucky. And here's some comments that were posted to the show blog. And I'm not reading this just because it was posted by my oldest and dearest friend from the 6th grade, who goes by 5x5 on LiveJournal, but because I think his comments really needed to be said with regards to this particular topic. Dear Minx, I'm writing in reference to the You're So Lucky discussion on podcast number 22. My first reaction was to recall Louis Pasteur's famous statement, "Chance favors the prepared mind." I think that really got to the heart of what you and your listener's letter were saying. However, as the discussion progressed, I couldn't help but think that while individual initiative, drive, and hard work are all critical to success, there are many other factors largely beyond our individual control that play a huge role in hindering or facilitating our success. And actually here I will insert, being more and more of a Zen type Buddhist every single day, I'm not going to disagree with you in the least. I was telling a friend recently that control is a really nice illusion. Actually, one of my beliefs is that we cannot control anything in our lives other than what we say and do. You can't control how other people treat you. To much extent, you can't control the things that happen to you in life. However, you can control your own actions and you can control your own thoughts. But I digress. He continues, let us consider the person lucky enough to be born to a crack-addicted homeless mother, lucky enough to be born to a migrant farm-working family raised on subsistence wages and pesticide fumes, lucky enough to have been born a lesbian woman in Kabul, Afghanistan, lucky enough to develop schizophrenia in inner-city America. My point is not that we should avoid owning up to our responsibilities or taking pride in our accomplishments. But I do think we have to look at the privileges we enjoy by virtue of birth alone. Our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, our language, our ethnicity, our religion, and our social class, among others. And I'm going to add here too, not the least of which is the country that many of us were fortunate enough to be born in, the United States of America. Although we have listeners all over the world, I'm just going to say right here, I believe that we Americans, we are pretty damn spoiled. Every now and then I sort of take a step back when I'm whining about, oh, I don't have an iPod. Oh, my iPod won't work. And then I think about, what millions and billions of other people in the world have to face every day, and I kind of tell myself to stop whining. So he continues, the factors of oppression that limit the, quote, luck, unquote, of someone born, quote, the wrong, end quote, race or class are not so removed from the oppression that says who we can love and how we can love, and that gets to the heart of our freedom to explore polyamory and all the gorgeously ambiguous shades of love and lust that make our lives so rich. And he concludes, with lots of love always, Minx, you are the bomb. Now, the original writer of this post, Jason, commented on 5x5 comments and added, I thought about similar things, as you mentioned when writing my letter about luck. What stopped me from mentioning class and birth and all that was the people I've known who believe all the privileged birth stuff to the point that they take no initiative because of where or how they were born. Middle-class white males who think that they'll always win out in a job interview over minority. Rich kids who think family money will be all they need. Or kids from the barrio or the hood that don't even try to improve their lot. I've always thought that many individual problems stem from nothing more complicated than inertia. I said all that just to say this. Success may be harder because of where you're from, what color, religion, sex, whatever you are, but you can get there with a little bit of luck and a whole lot of work. Don't let a sense of futility win, and never let the bastards keep you down. Minx, why is it that your show and site make me so dang wordy all the time? Oh, it's my fault. Cheers to all, and I hope I didn't annoy anyone too badly. Jason in Virginia. And in addition to, my comments already, notwithstanding that none of us have any control over anything apart from the things that we choose to say and do in life. But I would point out with Jason, too, that you're right. The problem with using a word like lucky is the sense of entitlement that it implies. There was a period of time when I was working for one of Chicago's most prestigious multi-millionaire, probably a billionaire, owns a major hotel chain. I'll leave it at that. And one of the things I noticed was, first of all, he was one of the most socially responsible people I have ever met in my entire life. And I admire this person and his entire family tremendously for it. But the other thing is, whenever I would mention him in conversation, people would, I don't know how to say this exactly, but it's sort of just finding out that somebody else was enormously wealthy, and he is enormously wealthy, but just finding out that someone else was wealthy, very often a friend of mine, like my friend's response would be, that's not fair, how can I get a piece of that? Or that's not fair, he should, I don't know, take you out on his boat or something like that. And, from somebody who, read his mail and went through all the, hundreds of letters asking for, very politely asking for charity, many of which he responded to, I kind of came to the philosophy of just because someone else has money, whether it's well-gained, as in his case, or ill-gained, as in other people's cases, just because someone else has money does not entitle you to any of it. You can ask nicely if you like, but it doesn't entitle you. Just because someone else is rich doesn't mean it's their job to give you something. Now, lest anyone think that I am cold and unfeeling, I do believe that we are a community of people and that it is actually our job to reach out and help friends and relatives or whoever you choose in need. I believe that we're all in this together and that it is, up to us to decide how we are going to show our support in the community. But the thing I'm trying to raise, and I don't think I'm saying it very well, is this sense of entitlement just because another person is wealthy or just because another person is successful, that somehow you are entitled to a part of that. Anyway, I'm going to stop right there. I kind of feel like I'm digging myself into a hole with that. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm saying exactly what I want to say. We'll probably revisit that later because we haven't talked about being lucky enough over the last few shows. Okay, moving on. Next letter. JM wrote in and said he found us through Violet Blue. Violet Blue's open source sex, who was nice enough to play my audio comment and mention me on the last show and call me sexy, which I'm still getting a kick out of. And so I'd like to extend a special welcome to our Violet Blue hijacked listeners. We do have a teensy-weensy bit of smut for you today, but not very much. We just want to be honest that, 80 to 90% of the time we're going to be talking about communication and not about threesomes, cocks, and fucking. And R wrote in about arguments, frubble, and Spider Robinson. Yes, for those of you who weren't aware, the previous sort of mission statement motto that I had mentioned about shared joy is increased and shared pain is lessened, that is the philosophy of Spider Robinson. Anyway, he started by giving me strokes and then continued with the thing in the last episode about being clear that arguments don't mean the relationship has to be questioned was absolutely golden. Elle and I looked at each other and said, yeah, that would be good. Your show has kept my head screwed on straight about more things than I care to count. A few times I've actually heard your voice in the back of my head and said to myself, oh yeah, open, honest communication. I forgot all about that. Okay, it really scares me a little bit that people hear my voice in the back of their heads like I'm a conscience or something. Eek. He continues, but last week I experienced my very first frubble. This is why I chose to read this letter, by the way, guys. I came home from a late meeting and I'll bracket, I did cut out a lot of this letter, but I will bracket, they being his wife and her lover who had broken up with him, but not with her. So, his wife and her lover were just finishing an evening together, all prearranged, this wasn't a surprise, and my first reaction wasn't the jealousy and hurt and left-outness I'd been marinating in for so long now. My first reaction was gratitude toward Dee for making my wife so happy. Yay for that! I love the rubble. He continues, here's what finally prompted me to write after many weeks of listening. I hereby claim my 2 points for catching the reference. Shared pain is lessened, shared joy increased. I think you should go ahead and plug the books in questions. In my opinion, if more people read them and loved them, this world would be a much better place. Well, okay, here we go. Here's the plug for Spider Robinson's The Callahan Chronicles. I'll put a link in the show notes, available at www.livejournal.com/users/polyweekly. And I've read them more than once, and there is a polyamorous, there's definitely a polyamorous triad, as well as a general spirit of openness. So let's throw our glass, make a toast, throw our glass in the fireplace, and read those books. Get Spider a little bit more money. Next letter is on the topic of arguments and I hate you days from Brent. He writes, the whole I love you, but right now I don't like you very much concept is something my partner and I credit for keeping our relationship healthy for the past 16 years. I still remember back in college when we discovered this. We started referring to days where we were really cross with one another as I hate you days. You know how they are. Everything your partner does grates on your nerves, and not just a little bit. Oh no, it grates on your nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. One day we had a huge blowout argument and one of us said, I am having an I hate you day. Let's step back a minute. From then on, the mention of an I hate you day was enough to elicit a wry chuckle and an I'm sorry, let's talk about this in a little bit. Probably the best thing about labeling these feelings, whether you say I'm having an I hate you day or I love you but I don't like you very much right now, is that you are honoring the complexity and the honesty of the emotions being felt. This ritual or process of acknowledgement lets you get past the transient right now feelings of anger and frustration while still recognizing their presence and validity. This lets you address your issues when everyone is in a better headspace for dealing with them. And now we know why I choose to read listener mail, because you guys say things so much better than I do. Well said. Thanks very much for writing in, Brent. And next, regarding this, do you guys remember the Secret Lover cards from last week? Well, a listener, Randy, wrote in to let me know that his friend, Carolyn, had written that company to compliment the cards and also, get this, to very politely ask if they could make some similar cards specific to polyamory. Quote a tiny bit from her letter. While some of your current card collection are appropriate for us, many are not, for we do not believe that love is an all-or-nothing proposition. So we don't love with the desire to have the other person to ourselves. And mainstream cards often don't hit the mark, for they too speak of love as the other person being the, quote, one and only. I think it's really great that Randy's friend wrote in. And what's more interesting is he shared with me that they wrote back and said that they would consider it. Here's a quote. "Thank you for your suggestion. We have not heard about your polyamorous community until now. We understand how frustrating it is not being able to communicate your sentiments via a greeting card. We'll take a look at the web links you sent to us." Huh. Look at that. So I am really curious to find out. I mean, obviously, they've really hit the market with this secret lover collection for people having secret, private, illicit affairs. And the cards, as I mentioned before, are very beautiful, very heartfelt, and very emotional. So I'm wondering if they will come out with poly-friendly secret lover cards. We'll keep you posted. Or I guess they'd be not so secret lover. I'm not sure. Can we come up with names of what we would call that card collection? And moving on to the really, really good stuff. Okay, here we go, listeners. Had some smut sent in. Haven't had a chance to get through everything. But first of all, Brent wrote in and did recommend and said, "My partner is an erotica writer. While she doesn't have anything much in the way of polysmut published, she pointed out, and yes, I'm mentioning these so we can provide links later on, that Morgan Hawk's Victorious Star and Fallen Star, both erotica novels published through Loose ID, and Fortune's Star, a novella published in the anthology Hard Candy from Loose ID, might be of interest. All three are sci-fi-ish erotica pieces that end up with an MMF triad in the happily ever after." I'm curious. "Alas, they're all too long to get airtime on Poly Weekly, but since you didn't get any responses from your first call out, I thought I'd send you something at least." Actually, Brent, I did get a couple of pieces, but we'll definitely provide links and places to find those in the show notes. He says, "My partner informs me that group sex is currently quite popular in the erotica market, and there should be at least some that also has poly themes." So moving on to the next letter, Sam wrote in with poly erotica. Now, what I'm going to do is tease you with my favorite part, and I'll put the rest on the show notes behind a cut. The title is 3 on the 4th. And I'm going to read you the paragraph that appealed to me the absolute most, because I actually don't read that much erotica, because the thing that appeals to me most, I'm less interested in the action, in the who did what, in the first I did this, and then he swung around to do this, and then we touched her clit, and then with her fingers she manipulated his cock, and then let out a moan, and then he did this. That doesn't appeal to me quite so much. It kind of reminds me of, in my days as an editor, there was a principle that we used to teach writing to high school kids, and we called it show, don't tell. So instead of saying, I did this, and then she did this, and then I did this, you would actually show what the person is thinking and show what the person is feeling instead of telling what the action was. So instead of saying, I don't know, I'm not an erotica writer. So instead of saying he manipulated her clit with his fingers, and then John moved over to kiss her, and then put his cock in her mouth, for example, I would be more interested in something that said, David looked up at her slyly and gently manipulated his fingers over her now brightly pink, throbbing pussy. She squirmed slightly in response, giggling with a slight bit of uncomfort at the new situation. He looked up at her, and she still gave a slight nod to let him know that yes, she was okay. Her face, however, was soon obscured by John's luscious mane of hair as he leaned in to brush his lips against hers in a tentative and yet passionate kiss. His tongue slid into her mouth, and she gently sucked on his lip. Something like that. But keep in mind, I don't really write erotica. I just kind of want to know what the people are thinking, what they're feeling, how their bodies are responding to the actual action that's taking place. Something more personal. So this was my favorite part of what Sam wrote in. "We all pulled in close, taking a short break while Faith recovered. There was some more kissing and fondling for a few minutes. Then Vince went between Faith's legs." Here's my favorite part. "I love the scent of sex, Faith's mine. It was amazing kissing her while she built to another orgasm, her scent strong in my nose already, the flush that came over her body, the shivers afterwards. It's amazing seeing her smile at me and another man at the same time. She was floating on a cloud. After a few minutes of glowing following her Vince-induced orgasm, I stood up and took off my clothes. And then there's more action. But do you see what I mean? I really like the smell and the sounds and the breathing. That's what really gets me. So I don't know, your taste in erotica may vary, but I did post the entire thing behind a cut on the Poly Weekly show notes. And next up in our mailbag, Adam and Chanterelle in Australia wrote in about a poly-swinging combo. On a more personal note, our relationship is open and polyamorous and extends into several other areas such as BDSM and swinging. Our swinging experiences have been amusing, as many of our swinging friends have gone running as soon as the first signs of emotional connection appear. We tend not to worry about relationship labels too much, as our personal focus is more on living and doing rather than battling over definitions and pedigree. Thank you again for producing Polyamory Weekly. Well said to our Australian friends. Thank you so much for writing in. Now, the final letter, well, the reason it's final is because it's going to lead into one of our topics for this week. And unfortunately, it's kind of, I am reading a lot of it because this really resonated with me, but in a bad way. We talk a lot about tolerance and acceptance, and we've actually gone over this quite a bit recently with respect to the poly versus the swinging community. But this is one listener's tale of going from being polyamorous to being monogamous and how their friends, family, and community responded. A, who is a listener, wrote in to tell a pretty awful story of making the transition from poly to mono. Her parents were poly, and they believed in freedom of relationship personal choice, and so coming out as bi and poly was pretty easy as a result. But when she was dating, nothing she would call committed, and her lover S was in a triad. This is what she says. After 2 years of seeing S, something odd happened. I realized that he monopolized my time, but not in a bad way. It wasn't oppressive or obligatory. I liked it. I wanted it. Now, he joked about being able to handle the big M, monogamy, if it were with me, but I began to wonder about the mechanics of this craziness. We came to realize that what we wanted in our relationship with one another was not only marriage, but also a form of sexual and emotional monogamy. At first, we were worried it wouldn't work, but it seemed and it felt right. So, after we discussed it ad nauseum, we decided that, although poly is a valid and wonderful way of life, it just wasn't what we were looking for in our relationship with one another. But when we came out, this time as monogamous, the fit hit the shan. Actually, on this podcast, we can say the shit hit the fan. My mom and dad disowned us, and my lovers likewise never spoke to me again, some with violent reactions. As for his relationship, near nuclear. S was labeled as a traitor, and I was really harassed. As a matter of fact, when our child was born 2 years later, the members of his old relationship called the Department of Social Services in regards to his past as a polyamorous man. Now, I tend to think that most of these reactions are the gut instinct of pain, but we do find negative reactions in other aspects of our life. And I'll insert here, yes, it does sound very much like people don't use very emotionally charged words like traitor, and they don't disown you if it's not usually a very strong pain reaction to being hurt. So I think it's really great that you recognize that there was a very strong emotional reaction on their parts. And she continues, for instance, we're constantly berated for our decision to become monogamous, but from the poly folks we still attempt to communicate with, we hear, you're not being true to yourselves, or monogamy is a lie and a trap. We also get, you're less enlightened or spiritual if you're not poly, which is hurtful seeing as we're pagan, and how can you be into the BDSM scene and be monogamous? Which is kind of a bitch because we happen to be both mono and into the local BDSM scene. This is especially difficult for me because I truly consider myself an advocate for relationship and sexual freedoms. I honestly believe that my open experiences with polyamory has led me to conduct a healthier relationship between my own husband and I, for example, honesty, communication, awareness, and improved intimacy. It has also greatly prepared me for being the mother of a little girl who is too fastly becoming a teenager, and who will need to know honest, hard facts about sex, relationships, and preferences, and their positives as well as downfalls. Needless to say, we really feel like outcasts. This sounds crazy. I know, we're mono, for God's sake. We're in the mainstream. But yeah, it's confusing when many old friends are so hurt by our personal decision. It's important to me, at least, to be able to find a way to reach these folks and say, I haven't abandoned you, or I still support, acknowledge the validity of your relationship, and it's unfortunate to lose you as a friend because of this. Neither S nor I feel that we've made a mistake in our choice and are very happy. It just really seems to fit for us. Oh, that was really hard to read, eh? And, I mean, it does sound that, yeah, obviously emotions were very high all around. And, again, I think it's one of the things we need to remember. I mean, it's fine to have emotions. It's fine to be mad at people. It's fine to be hurt by their decisions. But in the end, I think we do need to realize that if we are expecting tolerance and acceptance from other people for the polyamorous lifestyle, we need to be willing to extend that same tolerance and acceptance to people in monogamous or other lifestyles that are not the ones that we choose. Now, I have a difficult time with this. It's been a process. I will say it's been very difficult. One of the things that I have learned, and feel free to abuse this or not, or tell me I'm full of shit, is even when I have seen friends that I think are making a mistake, I will tell them, I think you're making a mistake. Here is why I think you're making a mistake. But I will respect your decision, and I try to find a way to continue to be their friend without constantly beating them over the head and telling them again how much I think they're making a mistake, and just finding a way to continue to be their friend. This has been a challenge. It's been a new phenomenon for me, but I've been working on it with some moderate levels of success. So, I don't know if that helps. But this leads on to the first topic, not just about tolerance, but about why we are poly in the first place. And by we, I mean Graydancer and myself. Yep. If you read my last blog posting, and we also alluded to it a little bit on the last show when Graydancer and I were talking about our relationship, and no, we're not ready to share all the horribly painful things we've been talking about. However, I will share with you the result of one very long afternoon of brainstorming where we decided to get way back to the basics, and we decided one of the things that would help us with the issues we were having was to sit down and brainstorm. Why are we poly in the first place? Let's get back to the positives. Let's stop talking about what isn't working for just a second and ask ourselves, why are we poly to begin with? And it's very interesting because he had very different ideas. He said very different things as to why he's poly. We wrote them all down. I said very different things as to why I'm poly. We wrote all those down. And then also answered the question, what is the benefit of being poly? What do I get out of being poly? And he answered that and I answered that. And at first it was really scary because our answers seemed very different. But then we went through them and we talked through them and we realized that in the broader thing, we express our polyamory in different ways, and it takes some work and some adjustments, and we'll be negotiating for quite a while, I'm sure. But in the end, when it comes down to it, it was actually pretty easy to come up with a mission statement for Graydancer and myself as a poly couple about what we believe as a poly couple. This is a statement of who we are, what we believe. This is our mission statement. And it came down to 4 very simple but very powerful statements for us. And yes, I'm going to share them with you right now, right here on Poly Weekly. First, we believe that love and sexuality are abundant and renewable resources and positive modes of self-expression that come in many forms. We believe that emotional intimacy requires brutal honesty, extensive introspection, and willing vulnerability. We believe that doing this kind of emotional work enables us to be more generous, caring, kind, compassionate, and whole individuals. And finally, we celebrate our connections with friends and lovers through mutual support and shared joy. Sorry, this is just Minx sitting here smiling. That was very I know it doesn't sound like much, but it was very emotionally draining to go through the process of coming up with that and of what we believe. So, up next, if you likewise would like to hear something positive about polyamory, and if you would like to feel refreshed and validated and go, "Oh, how sweet," I encourage you to read this reposting by Mistresse Matisse, who reposted in her blog how she met and originally fell in love with her partner of 6 years. And her blog is mistressematisse.blogspot.com, and I will post the link to that particular entry on the show notes. Next topic. Yeah, I know. Here we are 30 minutes into the show already, and I'm like, hey, let's talk about jealousy. Well, Tacit, whom I quote frequently on the show because he writes so extensively and so coherently on so many topics related to polyamory, that I finally had to, I talked to him about it, and he's like, well, I guess I have to start listening to the show if you're quoting me all the time. He recently wrote an article on jealousy and refrigerators. Yeah, seriously, jealousy and refrigerators. It's posted at www.livejournal.com/users/tacit, TACIT, /157242.html. And yes, the link will be provided in the show notes if you didn't get that. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs that I thought were especially pertinent, and then we'll do the, I'll give you a topic, discuss. Tacit writes, one of the central fixtures in most polyamorous relationships, especially polyamorous relationships between an existing couple who begin with a monogamous relationship and then expand the relationship to include polyamory, is a set of rules or covenants designed to protect the existing relationship and to make the people in the relationship feel secure. In other words, to deal with issues like jealousy, insecurity, and threat. I'm going to borrow Peristaltor's metaphor of the refrigerator and bend it to my own ends. Let's assume your relationship is a refrigerator. One day, a problem arises in your relationship. The refrigerator quits working. You walk into your kitchen, there's a puddle on the floor, and all of your frozen pizzas and ice cream are a gooey mass in the bottom of the freezer. There are a few things you can do at this point once you've mopped up the mess and scraped the remains of last night's lunch out of the fridge. One solution is to fix the refrigerator, another is to replace it. A third solution is to leave the refrigerator exactly where it is and change your life around the problem. From this day forward, I will bring no frozen or refrigerated foods into this house. In the poly community, the last option is the one most people choose. In a relationship, a fear or an insecurity is a symptom of a problem. In some cases, the fear is perfectly rational and justified. An abused child lives in fear of his abusive parent for good reason. He has tangible reason to fear. In a healthy relationship, though, these fears are almost always irrational and unfounded. Jealousy itself is an interesting emotion because jealousy is a composite emotion that is based on other emotions. It's a second-order emotional response. Something happens. That thing causes you to feel threatened or to feel insecure or to feel something negative about yourself, and then that fear or insecurity makes you feel jealous. For that reason, the root of jealousy is often surprisingly difficult to pin down and understand. No fucking shit. Instead, he continues, what happens is that people look at the event, which is the proximal cause of the jealousy, and assume that the event is the source of the problem. My partner kisses another person, I feel jealous, therefore it's the kiss that makes me jealous. The way to deal with the jealousy is to address his habit of kissing people. Now, this is only a small part of what Tacit wrote, which is much more ingenious and much more detailed. So I encourage you to go to the blog posting. I encourage you to comment there on the blog, talk amongst yourselves. If you feel like emailing me, feel free. But hey, we're going to be talking about jealousy for Polyamory Weekly until there is no more polyamory. Plenty of time. And finally, last but not least, I wanted to give props and a shout out to Amy Gahran of Contentious Blog, who recently made the decision to come out as poly on her professional blog. And I mentioned this a little bit before. And it's very interesting. Once I finally saw what she did, she has an extensive blog and with many links, many comments. She has Furl, she has Delicious, she has all these tools at her disposal. And, after this controversy, she talked to her listeners about how would they feel about people exposing personal information on blogs, blah, blah, blah. And then after all that, I looked and saw there's just this one tiny link towards the bottom that says something along the lines of, what is poly? And that's it. I mean, that's just, and I think people somehow had the notion that, you know, she was going to come out and do some big, flaming, huge activist statement or something. No, all she did was not hide it by putting one small link on her blog. So if people wanted to know about it, they would. And if they didn't, then they could very easily overlook it, not click on the link or what have you. So that was very interesting to me. Anyway, she has also started a new typepad blog about being poly, available at Gahran, that's agahran.typepad.com/mass of contradictions. Now, I will tell you, this is not in the least, not prurient in the least. So if you are looking for porn and smut, you're going to have to stick with the little we give you here at Poly Weekly, or what the heck, just go to Violet Blue's Open Source Sex for the really, really good porn and smut. Or one last thing before we sign off, a podcast that Graydancer turned me on, the Pizza Babe podcast, which I don't have the feed directly in front of me, so I'll post that on the show notes. And she does musical mashups, which I'm not terribly into, but she's just so very laid back about it, and she's just fun to listen to. She has a really sexy voice, and she's very honest, upfront, kind of whatever. And she's really fun to listen to and sounds really hot and sexy. So if you're looking for something a bit more prurient, hey, listen to Pizza Babe. All right, I think that about wraps it up for this week, guys. Thanks very much for listening. Welcome to our new Violet Blue and new iTunes listeners. If you have questions, comments, feedback, topics you'd like to hear on the show, oh, and yes, we are still working to arrange the interview, by the way, with Janet Hardy and Dossie Easton. No, I did not forget. Hoping to be able to get them through Skype this weekend, so cross your fingers. We'll be hearing from them very soon. Any feedback, email me, cunningminx, cunningminx, @gmail.com, or call the listener comment line at area code 206-600-5677. And remember, guys, even though we have a little bit of smut, it's not all about the sex.